violinist, Karin Hellqvist, is a performer of cutting-edge music. With profound engagement in the music of today, she is a sought-after soloist as well as a dedicated chamber musician. Through active collaborations and dialogue, her work aims at understanding, examining, realizing, and contributing to the process of creating new music, as well as challenging the established concert format and conventional collaborative structures. Karin Hellqvist is a member of several forefront ensembles for new music in Scandinavia, with Cicada, Oslo Sinfonietta, Neon, Faint Noise, and duo Hellqvist Amaral. She dedicates her time to commissioning and performing new works, as well as championing the established contemporary repertoire. In her solo projects, she recently commissioned a body of solo works exploring the violin in the company of electronics and various sound objects, paired with flower pots, guitar pedals, street noise, chainsaws, and birdsong. Regularly invited to renowned international scenes for contemporary music, she's performed at festivals at Warsaw Autumn, Wittener Tage, Donaueschinger Tage, Münchener Biennale, Huddersfield Contemporary Music Festival, Ultima Oslo Contemporary Music Festival, Venezia Biennale, Milano Musica, Ultraschall Berlin, Harvard University, Berlin Philharmonic, Pan Music Festival Seoul, and the International Summer Course for New Music in Darmstadt. Hellqvist's performances have been broadcasted in many countries, and she's contributed to several award-winning recordings. She's collaborating with Norwegian record label Lavo Classics, LAWO, on which her debut album Flock was released in October 2019. Karin Hellqvist's artistic research exposition titled Circular Bowing, Cyclical Work just came out in the Wies Journal, and it's online now, so please take a look. Quote, Circular Bowing, Cyclical Work explores the collaboration between composer Henrik Strindberg and myself, violinist Karin Hellqvist, from my viewpoint as performer and co-creator. On my initiative, as part of my PhD in artistic research at the Norwegian Academy of Music in Oslo, a cyclical collaborative practice is being developed. Our process differs from the conventional separation of roles that I have so far experienced as a performer of contemporary Western classical music. The exposition highlights how my understanding of the emerging concept of, quote, the artistic palette, unquote, develops through the shared work and dialogue around circulaire stroke for violin and electronics, when expanding my practice and establishing a new work mode. Through examples from the artistic process, the exposition aims at further unfolding how we as collaborators develop ways of challenging each other. A key word for my defiance of the traditional and formal task division is the search for connection to my collaborator, the work, and the embodied knowledge of my artistic palette. The exposition comprises written reflections, transcribed dialogue, and sketches, as well as video and audio documentation. Documentary video conversations are held in Swedish with English subtitles. Unquote. The following interview was recorded on the 25th of November 2022. Please enjoy this interview with Karin Hellqvist. What drives you as an artist researcher, and how do you engage with those ideas when you play and in your research?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you. It's really lovely. And I think my initial drive when I formulated what is now my PhD project in artistic research, it was really that I had come to a point in my performance practice where I felt I needed to change some things. I felt somehow, even though I worked with living composers and I knew many of them, they were my friends and so on, I felt that the process of composition and performance, they were quite often disconnected. And after many years of being a performer, I had accumulated this knowledge that I wanted to share, and I wanted to spill into these works. So I set up a sort of laboratory within my own practice, in which I decided to work with 5 amazing composers that I'm very fortunate to have on board, to see how I as a performer could be more integrated in the compositional process. And this turned out, I think, drive-wise, to be really, in the end, very much about the connection to these people and the relationships that were created through this. And making these pieces, it really became like this surface of knowledge exchange, which I had been longing so much for to have. And my practice definitely transformed through this. It's still going on very much. And I think also for the composers, this has been a process of transformation and change. So yeah, I think it might have started out with a frustration, or perhaps the idea that it could be something more to this, working with living composers, turning into this search for connection to them, which living in every day now through this project, and it's wonderful, really.
Yeah, it is lovely. You speak about things that are really inspiring for me to hear, such as you interacting with the process of composition and your voice being a part and a shared process. So also what you personally get out of the relationship with these composers with whom you work, how that is influencing you as a person in your life. It's all very inspiring. Wow. My second question is, what does it mean to be a performer in your own body and in your own experience and in your own world?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question, I think, and very relevant to artistic research, since research is really done from our own bodies. And in my case, what's been transforming has been the view of my body as a site for knowledge. And we speak about this embodied knowledge that we all have in different ways, which is acquired over a lifetime, and especially in the contact with the instrument every day, we shape this knowledge, and the body as this knowing subject. And especially in one of my collaborations with the composer Lisa Lim from Australia, we have been looking at how my heritage of Swedish folk music, I used to play traditional Swedish folk music since I was a kid, but I never really considered it to be very important in my practice of contemporary art music. But we have looked together on how this embodied knowledge of this tradition resides in my body, and how we can bring it out in the shape of a collaborative work. So I think all these kinds of embodied patterns, the ornaments, the way of phrasing, all the tunes that exist in me, and also it is a practice of oral transfer. I mean, I hear it from old fiddlers playing these tunes, and it's transferred like this. This brings the temporal aspects of this as a tradition that exists in my body, and perhaps also in bodies before mine. It's a long tradition, many hundreds years back. So this is one thing of being in my body that artistic research opened up for me, and with the work with Lisa Lim.
The last question is, what is a publication or book that you could recommend to the artistic research communities?
Yeah, I thought, since you probably interview people from many parts of the world and engaged in artistic research, which is different from different fields, um, and geographical context, I thought that I would recommend it's an online journal called VIS, Nordic Journal for Artistic Research, which you might have known about. And I find it very interesting contribution to the field of Nordic research, and there's a great diversity of the different kinds of expositions in this journal. And I will self-promote myself, and I will say that in the next edition, which is now released in November, I have exposition which speaks about one of the collaborations of my project together with composer Henrik Strindberg, and it's called Circular Bowing Cyclical Work. And through the metaphor of the circular bowing on the violin, we explore cyclical ways of composing a violin solo. So that's my recommendation.
Wow, fantastic. That sounds really absolutely amazing. So in everything that you say, I can see this tight connection that we're really looking for in artistic research, that things start somewhere in the practice, but that they go back and forth with other components, whether this is the literature or whether this is other fields, other people sharing ideas. I mean, this is all really wonderful. And how, in your case, it does always circle back to your playing, and there's always sound involved.
Yeah, I've tried many different ways of writing and different languages, and I also became very passionate about coming back to writing because I found it something that I was missing a lot in my practice, and through this conservatoire education we have, it's not really in focus, right, to write. And yeah, right now I'm working on a text which is about the collaboration with Lisa Lim, for example. And then I've tried to use two different kinds of voices. So one is more speaking from within, trying to speak as if from within, trying to describe what happens in my body when I play both the folk music but also the work of Lisa, and trying to describe really the bodily sensations of keeping these rhythms and the ornaments within myself. And then of course we also have to contextualize this and put it in a setting, so then I have another voice speaking more like a bit from outside, and trying to wrap this in somehow. And I find it very inspiring. I don't know where this text will go and how I will frame it in the end. But yeah, no, it's interesting what you say. And it's also so interesting finding ways of bringing all these kinds of media into an exposition. Like we have the pictures of the sketches and drawings, and we have the small audio things we have recorded, and trying to make this a lively part of an exposition. It's a challenge sometimes, but it's really worth it, and it's a new field that we create together, right? So
Yeah, and I cannot wait to see your exposition in Wies in the
yeah,
journal. And I love the multimedia and kind of really cutting edge design of the journal
yeah,
that allows so much visual and so much like audio visual and text, and just a lovely combination that is really a different thing
mm,
than looking at texts, just
yes,
text.
yes,
So I'm really interested in this. So here's a little, very, very little detour that I'm wondering if we can take. So
yes,
when in my work on Brahms' Violin Concerto, I was thinking about, the literature, and everybody says, Joseph Joachim, yes, he contributed something, but it was mostly to make things more idiomatic.
mm,
And then in all the literature it says, okay, so Joachim improved the technical side and made it more like violinistic, playable, but really the work itself is the themes and the Brahmsian language and the Brahmsian harmony. With that, idiomacy and passage work doesn't have to do so much with that. And so this hierarchy of like sonata form and the themes are like, the most important. But then when it comes to passage work and technical things, that's like secondary. I'm kind of looking a little bit into this, whether performers, when they play something that is thematic versus they play something that is idiomatic, and say passage work in a concerto, whether they also have this kind of primary and secondary hierarchy or not. And so would you mind commenting on this question as well?
Wow. Oh, that sounds very interesting. There's so many levels that one wants to think about in this. I mean, first of all, this view of musicians just contributing with the craft and not with the art, which fortunately I feel like we are leaving behind. I mean, just having Josef Joachim in the room and speaking to him, already this contributes so much to the whole process of creating this work. And yeah, no, there's so many writings nowadays that highlights how this contributes to the process. And this thing about idiomacy, I have to say I've been thinking a lot about it, especially in this collaboration with Henrik Strindberg, actually. It's also something, what is idiomatic on one's instrument, what is personal, what is idiomatic. And I guess I'm always trying to think like figuring out if something is idiomatic is in a way having a vision of what it might be able to sound like one day, and understanding also, if you have that mindset, to understand what a composer wants it to sound like, and then trying to find ways on your instrument, which is a really creative process, right? To envision something and make it possible to happen on your instrument. So with Henrik, we have been trying so many different kinds of sketches and techniques and drafts, and sometimes with this contemporary music, also the classical music, you have to work for perhaps many months before you can play a passage, and it's difficult to know if something is idiomatic if you just read from the page or practice a day or two. So this is something that has been circling my mind also, how we as musicians decide what is idiomatic and not, and what works and not. It's super interesting.
What you just said was super interesting, because isn't it the case that every single violinist in the world, you really have your own what is idiomatic?
Yes.
Because it's your own body and it's your own way of thinking about everything. And I'm often thinking about, what do I really find comfortable? What do I enjoy feeling in my hands? And it's very different, I think, from everybody else.
Yes, definitely. And there, this whole thinking about body comes in, right? How just the length of our arms, how fingers fit together, like my pink is quite short, but I have long underarms. How does this affect the way you're playing virtuosic material? And it's very fascinating.
Absolutely. So I'm so inspired by your ideas, and I'm so excited that we're having this conversation. I cannot thank you enough.